Hi all, it's Thursday again and today's date is June the 11th. This is the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show and my name's Thomas Williams. Now this is another of my series From Russia with Love, and it's in 3 parts, and what will unfold after these 3 will be a clearer understanding and path for all peoples once the illusions of this world is seen, absorbed, processed, and then a desire to move forward on our paths, not theirs. People really like these shows. Why? Because the frequency of fog and lies is being dropped and a new path emerges. It has been a fairly strange week for me, a confirming one in many ways, as the doubts or suspicions were revealed in startling fashion, and any illusions or doubts I had were no longer prevalent. As others fall from grace, we wish them well and continue on our path with THI and TPC as we have always done. But this week reaffirmed so much to me and is a source of pride and enormous pleasure to see the impact myself and our show has had. My mini break this week revealed much, and I was able to make 7 people very happy this week, and one in particular. But this was not one-sided, as I got just as much from them all as they got from me. But the sheer joy on those people's faces will always comfort me in times of stress or doubts, and I will let them reveal that day themselves. This is what THI is all about. We are not and never were about money or trust funds. We are about making each other happy, learning together, creating friendships and bonds, caring for each other, supporting each other, and providing solutions for our future. That is what we and I are about, always was, and always will be. People that come together, and we are all made of stars. Perhaps that's not as prevalent in people's minds as people should think, particularly in THI. Right, on with the show. The implications of this show, and then the second and third parts of this show are wide-ranging and will involve several pieces of my work that I have put together, plus supporting information from others, and it's more of the dots that will be connected. And if you have absorbed the previous episodes of this series, plus some of the op-ed pieces I've done in the shows, a clearer picture begins to emerge. This will be dot connecting on a massive scale, and the term of upsetting the apple cart will apply here to encompass much of From Russia with Love 1 through 7, and also adds much deeper layers to it as the never-ending rabbit hole goes deeper, wider, higher and lower than you all imagined. Upsetting the apple cart means to ruin a plan or an event, and this series does that when you connect it all together. If you leave the apple cart untouched, it begins to rot the fruit. The fruit was us. They are the cart. That cart is losing its wheels and it's a bit rackety today. And these 3 parts, plus an up-and-coming From Russia with 9, which may not happen now, or another version of it, will disassemble the cart, which is the framework of the dark forces. This one involves astro-astrology, moon worship, occultism, demonism, all under the auspices of Hebrew or Jewish religion, Hinduism, and several other organisations. Part 2 will reveal the umbrella they all fall under, and Part 3 will add more and connect more of the dots. It also brings in the Saturn-Moon matrix. What is the eclipse? The Vril role in it all. Yin and Yang explanations. Solomon, temples and sacrifice. Dark magic. India and its deities. Well, first we will go into a summary of From Russia with Love 1 through 7 as a recap, as parts of 8A tonight and B and C to follow will connect dots back to the previous episodes on a massive scale. So we started off on our journey of From Russia with Love that was initially supposed to be a 2 or 3, maximum 4-part series, with 4 or 3 being a review of the previous episodes, and it developed into so much more. So From Russia with Love 1 brought in the Aryans, the Kalima, the sub-grey race, the Knight of the Svarog, the Vedic text, which are nothing to do with India, the Koshis, who are the dark forces, and the 3 moons in our skies, the fake Bolshevik takeover of Russia done by the priest class known as Cohen or Khan, the lost continent of the Arya, later known as Hyperborea, spacecraft travel on this world, the stargates and the celestial needles, the 4 palaces, which are known as the constellations now, the 4 gardens of Eden, who are and were the Israelites, and who was the Lord. That was all in part 1. Part 2, we heard about the real genocide that took place against the Russian people, not the Zionist-based only narrative, how the heirs tries to use genetics to cure the Kalima peoples, how the heirs taught the Rus and the Aryan populations how to be a higher form of human, the fast destroyer weapon used on this planet, the war of Atlantis, not Atlantis. We heard of the original Jerusalem not being in Israel, but Russia called Jerusalem. We heard about Radomir and Mary Magdalene. Both had blue eyes, and Mary had the blonde hair as well, meaning they were Rus Aryan, not Middle Eastern. Part 3 brought us how all of society's main functions designed to protect or serve the people are corrupted. The exodus to Egypt, not from. The cult of Ra in Egypt and the exodus out of there into Europe, where they quickly went through the houses and also the churches. The rise of the cat cult, Cleopatra, Mark Antony and Julius Caesar. We learned how the genealogy of the Jews out of India and the Istan countries, lots of word magic and mistranslations, how the Exodus not only went east but north as well and created the Ashkenazi line from Noah, who was not one of us, but one of the Anunnaki line. We learned of Solomon, Hebrew, temples and ritual sacrifice, what the 6-pointed star really means. There was no letter J 2,000 years ago. Baal proved the modern day Israelite country, tradition, narrative and characters all came out of Egypt. Marduk, who played Ra. Moloch, the child sacrificer, represented by an owl, as the Egyptian word for owl is Moloch or Molech. The Sanhedrin, the Talmud, why all roads lead to Rome, not from, and their role in the subversion of humanity. Part 4 showed how the Israelite cult of Ra, formerly the Kalima peoples, took over the houses of Europe and the names involved in it, particularly the Rothschild family, how they took over the courts, banking, finance and governments. We also found out who really owned the slave ships ran under the banner of Dutch and British East India Tea Corporation. Eugenics, the reverse psychology program of white supremacy, New Age fakery, Planned Parenthood, how the white race in the 1920s represented 30% plus of the world demographics, now down to 12 and possibly even down to 9% since, and fallen. The setting the stage of the takeover of America, the massacre of the indigenous people in America in 1921 in Tulsa, how the term Indian came not from America, but India itself. We learned who are the KKK and their connections to the Democrats of not only America, but the Nazis in Germany. And no, Nazi does not mean German. It's National Zionism, N-A-Z-I. Zionism is part of the cult and has no real country. We also learned how the African slaves traded their own people long before Europeans arrived. How 98% of people who call themselves African American are actually indigenous Americans, not African. The takeover of Germany, done by the same Zionists that ransacked, destroyed and murdered nearly 90 million Russians in the space of 20 years. The fake Templars, fake founding fathers, and we asked the question in part 4, were the Germans duped? That has since been proven correct. And we also asked the question, if Germany was all about the white race, why did they attack Poland, the Slavic or Russian peoples? We heard how there was 2 attempts by Hitler to get all the Jews out of the camps, and the Rothschilds and Begin refused. We heard how the Rothschilds, along with Lord Balfour, went about creating the future Jewish state. We heard of where the 2 worst plagues on this planet originated in India and Egypt. Coincidence? Part 5 brought us the fake Melchizedek line. Who were the Cathars? The Lord being Anu, the reptile Draco King. The mark of the Nephilim, which is scaly skin. Ascended masters, or ascended masters is the correct term, are not from the sky, but it is us after developing on a soul level. What is a god? It is based on people or beings developing their soul, not some fake entity coming down from the sky in a fiery chariot. None of them developed themselves and so tried to piggyback on humanity. We learned of the Kalergi plan of the Zionists. We learned of the protocols of the Elder of Zion, which paid stooges and scholars have gone to great lengths to deny it was real. Methinks they doth protest too much for it not to be real, plus the fact that so much of that narrative has played out. We went through the Hebrew terms and traditions, fake calendars, fake holy days, all based on paganism, how the Hebrews accepted the bribes and seducement of the Lord, Anu, just as the Australian New Zealand tribes did 16,500 years ago, and sold humanity out. We then learned of the fake religion based on some non-existent Egyptian plates given to the Mormons by an angel, that mysteriously disappeared, including some of the incriminating text, and then morphed into a child-abusing and sacrificial cult known as Mormonism, replete with the old Egyptian symbolism, the temple, the altar, the sacrifice, and the cult of Ra. We went into the word magic Hebrew style, the role of the crown in their temple gates, church, knights, and bar, and how they forced the Magna Carta on King John and sold out all British subjects, not freed them, as some alt-media people would have you believe. How Adam and Lilith were not human, but their creations via genetics. How the popular Vulcan sign in Star Trek is a Hebrew Kabbalah secret sign. The life longevity of the biblical characters Noah, Abraham, Adam and Enoch. Why? Because they were one of them, not one of us. We learned of the moon cult, paganism all wrapped into it, the rise of Zionism from the 1600s onwards, the role of New York and this cult, Cleopatra's Needle, all about the cult of Ra, sacrificial and sexual deviancy practices, all originating out of New York. Financial and global skullduggery via the Federal Reserve, Wall Street and the UN, all out of New York. And the rise of the now common term in THI shows of born in, born to, New York and Jewish parents. How Joachim and Boaz turned into Osiris with the Twin Towers tragedy on 9/11. How and why New York is dubbed Gotham and the rise of the Dark Elves. Portrayed as a superhero in Batman, but it and they are not our friends, far from it. We learned that the Hitler Youth song, Tomorrow Belongs to Me, was written by two Jewish people, which sounds crazy to many people. Not when you connect the dots, it's not. Same program, same cult. And we ended part 5 with the role of AIPAC, in and on proceedings in this country, a political driver of politics and policies in favour of the Zionist state known as Israel. Isis, Ra and El, which means God. Secret cells dotted all over America pretending to be charity of some sort, but essentially have bought and paid for virtually every politician. They, along with the lesser-known group known as J Street, have done far more damage in this coup of America than most people realise, all done by this cult. In part 6 we went back to Russia of how the Rothschild clan and the Zido Masons stole everything from Russia, and it was the stolen funds from Russia that Americans enjoyed their prosperity from since World War I and more so after World War II. The role of the Swiss, which means the twin sisters, is ISIS. That's where Switzerland comes from, the name. The fake Russian names that were all actually Jewish. How Leo Wanta and his Langley 2 counterparts with Reagan looted everything out of Russia again following the end of the fake Cold War and the alleged fall of communism. Communism was created by the Zionists, not Russians, Chinese or any other country. How successive so-called Russian leaders from World War I were all Zionists looting the country and murdering the people. How Ray C. Dam, another one of Rothschild's appointed Langley operatives, tried to steal the global accounts via the OITC, with other Langley-based clowns like Keenan, Keith Scott, Winston Shrout, also playing roles in global theft and control attempts, along with the World Bank fraudster Karen Hudes. Part 7 brought in the OSS, which is SS, which became the CIA and NSA, all under the banner of Five Eyes, which went to Nine Eyes and More Eyes, and then went to No Eyes, courtesy of the work of the Trust. From the role of the OSS to cryptography, which led to the creation of the NSA, Enigma machines, the whole structure, their roles and purpose of each division of the OSS, how they went about subverting peoples, governments, created wars, assassination programs, and their role in communications of how they control every form of communication on the planet. How the CIA and the National Security Act, which was created not to protect Americans or the country, but to cover up agency-led crimes and operations. Clandestine money-making programs, black budgets and operations, plus loot countries and their people. All the early CIA leaders were all linked with the OSS. Then came the Bushes, Cheneys and the Black Dragon groups. All were traitors to the country and the people. We learned of the P2 Lodge, known as Pro-Pagan Dar Jew. We learned of several CIA offshoot splinter groups like Robert David Steele and his aptly named company called OSS. How they used all the so-called stars for their future operations, how they controlled the media, how their scripts is the news. We found out how John Lennon, Elvis, Metallica and Carl Jung all were used by the CIA as spies or operatives. How they deal with people who were their assets and suddenly became disposable, either by throwing them in jail under false charges or just taking them out, or using their MKUltra tactics to get their former assets to commit suicide by triggering mechanisms attached to the mind control program. Who was involved in the JFK assassination? The Cypher program, the Black Chamber, using a New York commercial code company to spy on all communications, and how the British used the post office for data mining as far back as the 1920s. How the CIA in 1970 was spending $1 billion a year on propaganda alone. And also since the 1940s they have been in every college or university profiling everyone and recruiting students for their various programs. The Foreign National Student Exchange Program is also run by the CIA and the Vatican. We ended part 7 with the exposure of the Tavistock Institute, also connected to the CIA and OSS, their mind control programs that roped in MKUltra tactics on the people of interest. They also used and created in some cases the stars of the time. The Beatles and the Rolling Stones were a product of Tavistock. Also hip-hop and rap came from Tavistock. And we ended that show with a question. And the question remains, if all this fighting for freedom and getting rid of dictators, despots, communists, tyrants that has gone on for the last 100 years, and with them all out of the way now, why hasn't our lives improved one iota? It hasn't, because the real tyrants are still in our midst today is why. And perhaps the leading figures killed in those plots were not the problem after all, just the ones who killed them. This show and the next 2 shows lined up will bring it all home. This is 8 and the Loop. This will create the umbrella with which all the names we have referenced in previous shows, from the Kalimar to the Cult of Ra, Jewish, Hebrew and the various agencies operate under. And it will make you understand more of how it all worked and who were the players, or in real terms, the pawns in the game. Right, we started off 8A with the sun, the moon and astronomy. And I wish people wouldn't ask me questions during the show, but sometimes it's helpful. So I mentioned a few minutes ago, maybe From Russia with Line 9 would not follow. Well, the reason for that is, and I can still do it to a point, but there was a very symbolic, metaphysical, multiverse and esoteric reason behind From Russia with Love 9 that has been kind of ruined with events with the trustee of the past month. Time will tell whether that changes. So this next section is the sun, the moon and astronomy. And modern day science still struggles to make sense of the world around us. If information is often denied, if it sways off the official path, as it were, and none more so than when astronomy comes into the picture. A plethora of misinformation, from flat earth to distances of how everything is so far away when actually it's not. Science can't or won't explain of why when you go into the sky and space, which is closer to the sun, it gets colder, not warmer. There is a reason the Catholic Church closed down the school teaching program in the 14th century, when astronomy was the lead subject taught, and dismissed it as fake science. And yet, curiously today, they control most of the world's telescopes, including one by the aptly named title, for them anyway, called Lucifer. Does anyone ask why the church, the so-called Holy Church, based on morals and principles and the worship of God, calling their telescope by the devilish name Lucifer? Does that make any sense to anyone? It will if you have followed this series. Solar eclipses make no sense. The moon makes no sense. All the elites and witchcraft people all do occult rituals on the cycles of the moon. The Hebrew Jewish peoples, India and other corrupted tribal groups, all following the moon cult. In the mythologies and even more modern day calculations and observances of the frequency spike during the full moon that sends many people around the world into various bizarre and extreme behaviour patterns. Perhaps we've had a full moon for the last month. And there is a reason for the term lunatic for unbalanced people. Perhaps the breakdown of that word makes things more clear. Lunar meaning moon, tick means parasite. The moon cycle created what are deemed the myths of werewolves. They, those entities, are not myths, but reality-based. and there is still a whole family lines around the world which contain that genetic default. The wolf realm is the first realm some people encounter with travel abilities and know it's not good, despite several Native American cultures adopting it as their animal totem. Like the astral realm, it has become corrupted and a trap. The next realm along is the circus realm, and this is why people fear clowns and mirrors. The Hall of Mirrors, anyone? All of Marduk's meetings, the Bilderbergs, the Club of Rome, the UN and other secret society meetings, financial meetings, the delivery of the fabled non-existent, non-deliverable RV, currency revaluation, was all done or happening on the lunar cycle. The Circle of Nine cult, the people inside the Vatican, Bohemian Grove, the Denver cult, the Hellfire Caves and various others around the world all did their rituals, sexual deviancy, often with children, sacrificed and tortured children again on the moon cycle. Modern witches all do their spells and rituals, all pulled along with the New Age program, which was all set up in the 1880s by the likes of Blavatsky and others. Some think Blavatsky, Steiner and the Lord of One talks about good things, and yes it does. Like the Catholic Church, but there is a hidden hook. That too many go too far down the fishing line before being able to see it. People get trapped in the word spells of love and light, unity, consciousness, Mother Nature, all of which is nice to hear and make it actionable, but there is a hidden element to it oblivious to the naive amongst us. The Lord of One, peddled by David Wilcock, is all about Ra, the harvesting and murdering humanity entity, which is all told in one story that is written on Cleopatra's Needle, situated in New York, and then throw in the fact that channeling is all done by technology trickery, largely to the people who have been in the MK Ultra programs, and you are left listening to what you want to hear, not what you need to hear. In the world of witchcraft, it's all about the moon goddess names and titles with them people, as any quick internet search on their groups will show you. Modern witchcraft is the practice of paganism and Wicca, again a group who partook in the moon worship and the sacrifice rituals, including at Stonehenge. Islam is another of the moon cults, hence the crescent moon as their symbol, and moon worship has been practiced in Arabia since 2000 BC. Yes, before Caesar. The crescent moon is the most common symbol of pagan moon worship as far back as 2000 BC. Long before Muhammad, there was a god named Hubal, who was the lord of the Kaaba. This Hubal was a moon god. Each local pagan Arab tribe would refer to their own local tribal pagan god as Al-Ilah. Al-A-L-I-L-A-H was later shortened to Allah when Muhammad began promoting his new religion in 610 AD. So what this tells us is the root of Islam is paganism, moon rituals, mired in with witchcraft and the dance with the demons, and jinns via their dark magic. And they can protest, but we are light witches all they like. Both light and dark in witchcraft use the jinns to perform their spells and magic. And this is what we've talked about in other shows and recently, that we must observe the dark, not absorb them. These people practice the Ouija board, again dancing with the dark, again bringing in the corrupted spirit world, and all of it is corrupted, and in large parts now was corrupted. The same applies with ayahuasca or peyote ceremonies. Most of the shaman or sham men have no idea what they're getting into with the participants. And it's all in the name of spirituality, they say. All in the name of making money, is my reply, with dire consequences in some cases for those who participate. So why all the moon worship? Well, this goes back to From Russia with Love Part 1 and the worship of the Kali Ma, known as the Dark Mother, which is the moon, and the female representation of the moon is Lilith, who was the real partner of Adam, not Eve. All depictions of Lilith are half human and half serpent. Perhaps it confirms it was a she, Lilith, the talking snake. And that was in the Garden of Eden, not Eve, as described. And when we did the original of this, we were in the week of the ultimate in dark entertainment, or perhaps entrainment is the better word, that rolls the children around the world of Dancing with the Dark and Halloween. It takes place at night, as it's moon related again. It is the night the dark elements in our society call in the dead spirits and jinns for a night of celebration, using spells and incantations, and even uses children to act out on it. Nowadays it has turned into a money marketing scheme, same thing, harvesting. But the hidden dark intentions behind should not be lost in the plethora of pumpkins, masks, oh my, costumes and candy. The original called it All Hallows Eve and was pagan in origin. Perhaps the Eve is All Hallows Lilith. Until the Catholic Church Christianized it into Halloween. And they did the same with the Easter festival, again pagan in origin, as worship of the goddess Ostara. The Catholic Church changed it in the 8th century and morphed it into the Jesus story. All Hallows Eve, all hail Eve, except Eve was Lilith, half woman, half serpent, and subsequently a chimera. Now Lilith is often envisioned as the dangerous demon of the night, who is sexually wanton and who steals babies in the darkness, worshipped by the Hebrews via the Talmud. And is it possible there is reference to her in the Lord's Prayer, hallowed be thy name. Our current moon is not even a natural object. Like Phobos, the Death Star, its orbital spin is unnatural in comparison to every other moon in the solar system. The same side always faces the Earth. That is not a natural orbit. That is something that was placed and positioned there. Native American folklore say the moon, or this current moon, arrived here sometime around 11 to 12,000 years ago. It is a hollow satellite station, as NASA proved when they fired a missile at it and it rang like a bell for hours on end. Populated by various off-world entities over time and still to this day, although unlike in the past is not interfering with here and us anymore, although there has been recent evidence of trying to continue that practice, which was cut short. And why NASA never returned to the moon since the 1970s. It was linked in a frequency-based relay of mind control system with Saturn, known as the Saturn Moon Matrix, until events in the past 5 years ended that technology and the program of interference. And this is why they're trying to create a new AI. The solar eclipse creates awe and fear around the world depending on the culture. Having witnessed the last one in America and the one in the UK in 1999, although the UK was heavily masked with clouds, and some of the American one was also courtesy of the military, who were out chemtrailing the skies at the point of origin near Charleston. And the biggest issue I and others have is nobody sees the moon, either before or after the eclipse. Science and media dismiss it all so frivolously, and the topic is largely left alone. But the great question remains is, why don't we see the moon? Well, we all see it going across the sun, Thomas. No, you see an object going across the sun. And because you are told it is the moon, doesn't mean it is correct. Why can't you even see the features on the moon as it is eclipsing? The light is focused on the far side, not the Earth-facing side. And according to Vedic astronomy, the most ancient and said to be the most accurate system of astronomy on the planet, solar eclipses are not caused by the moon coming in front of the sun as astronomers believe. Rather, the moon is described as being further away than the sun, and what happens at that time of a solar eclipse is our moon goes behind the sun, and a dark planet called Rahu comes between the sun and the earth. Ra, of course, is the title of the fake solar god that comes under the banner of the Son of God, Son spelled S-O-N instead of S-U-N, played by Marduk and Anu in the past, plus some of the Egyptian pharaohs. Pharaoh means the great house. So now you know where the terms of House of Bavaria or Saxe or Anjin comes from now, all out of Egypt. Now, Hu, H-U, in Sumerian means serpent. In Sanskrit it means dragon. So Rahu could well mean Ra is the head serpent or dragon. Of course, we have been conditioned to believe that as fact, the structure of the universe as it has been taught to us since childhood, and we find it very difficult to accept such a thing. But how can the teachers or book be wrong? People would argue. Because they were taught wrong also. And it only takes 2 generations to do a 180 on any narrative. All the Aryans are white supremacist narrative is a prime example. But it only requires a little thought and observation to see that actually the so-called modern scientific idea is incompatible with their observations, and the timeless Vedic knowledge is compatible with clear observations. Look at the moon on a full moon night. It is shining so brightly that it lights up the whole surface of the earth that it faces. On a full moon night, you can see very clearly everything. Of course, it's not as bright as the sunshine, but essentially everything is very clearly visible. But if you were to view the earth from space on a full moon night, it would not be dark. It would be illuminated by the moonshine. And all the features of the earth would be clearly visible. So as there is moonshine, there must also be earthshine. Much of the earth is covered by water, which is a good reflector of sunlight and light in and of itself. In fact, most of the scientists say that earthshine is much brighter than moonshine. And we know the earth is enormous in comparison to the size of the moon. The moon is around 27% of the size of Earth by comparison. So if the moonshine can completely illuminate this Earth on a full moon night, then it would make sense the earthshine can completely illuminate the moon. The earthshine bombarding the moon at the time of a total solar eclipse would be at almost 50 times brighter than the moonshine on the earth on a full moon night. And if Western astronomers are correct, the solar eclipse would be the perfect time to see the moon illuminated by the earthshine. Because the earth is in the shadow, remember? And so it should be like a tunnel. Light at the end of the tunnel, which would be the moon. And the shadow created which causes the solar eclipse on Earth is, according to NASA, almost 167 miles wide. But in that 167 miles wide, there should be the earthshine. So if you were sitting on the moon during a solar eclipse, you would see an extremely bright Earth planet with a dark circle of only 167 miles wide. That is not enough to diminish the earthshine in any significant way. And for people who have seen the solar eclipse, it only goes dark for a short period of time. Either side of that darkness, it is light. And that light on the rest of the surface should illuminate the moon. So why is the circle only 167 miles wide when the moon is covering the whole sun as observed? Does that make any sense? When the sun tracks our planet, it is in a giant wave motion, like an upside down U. You can see this on Google Earth. That covers an area of sunlight from California or the west coast to the extreme west of India. And you can see this on any given day. And that is a total of 8,490 miles. So surely a total eclipse would plunge that same area in darkness, not a 167-mile region of totality. So even though the sun is behind the moon, the full force of the sunshine is hitting the earth and reflecting off the blue oceans and reflecting off the land also, so the moon is completely illuminated by earthshine, even though the sun is directly behind it. The problem is you can't see the moon, both approaching the sun or leaving it after the eclipse. Now, if Western astronomers were correct, if you were in that 167-mile wide path of the total eclipse of the sun, when the sun was completely covered, you would of course see the sky become black, and then you could see the stars. But if the sun was covered by the moon, you would be able to see the moon quite clearly in front of the sun, illuminated by the earth shine. It would not be as bright as the full moon, but the earth shine would certainly illuminate the surface of the moon, so we could clearly see it and clearly make out the features on the moon's surface. But this does not happen. During a solar eclipse, the sun goes completely black, and even though the sunlight is blocked out and the sky goes black, one cannot detect the moon at all. It is just black. No moon. We should be able to see the features on the moon as it's being bathed in the brilliant earth shine. The sun should disappear and we should see all the stars, and in place of the sun we should see the moon illuminated by the earth shine. But we don't see this. So what does this mean? Well, what it means is it's not the moon causing the solar eclipses, as stated from the Vedas. That what causes the solar eclipses is a dark planet currently unknown in the Western world, except in occultic circles, which hides in the shadow of the moon. But scientists would have discovered this by now. It was only 80 years ago when they discovered Pluto as the 9th planet, not 8th, as they put out in the mainstream. Before that was Ceres, which is rarely mentioned, like the dwarf planet Eris, said to be discovered in 2005. Rahu is relatively close to us, around about the same distance as we think the moon is, but it's completely black. It does not reflect light at all. So even though there is plenty of earthshine falling on Rahu, because it's black, a black planet, none of that light will be reflected back. People who go out on a hot sunny day are told to not wear a black top or t-shirt. Why? Because the t-shirt absorbs it and heats you even more, where a white t-shirt or top will reflect it and make you cooler. So there's an example of that. So we would see the sun simply blacked out in the sky on a full eclipse, which is exactly what we do see. Now science tells you the moon is roughly 250,000 miles away, but some calculations based on geometry suggest it is 3,000 miles away. And all I know, by observance on some days, it looks a lot closer than is being made out. Now I suspect this dark planet Rahu also has elements of cloaking attached to it. People have seen the evidence of such on YouTube videos of the moon rippling. It makes no sense that people can see the moon on opposite sides of the world at the same time. Is Rahu invisible at certain times? It is likely a projection image, and so possibly a copy of our moon. So this is absolute proof that the assumption of Western astronomers that solar eclipses are caused by the moon coming between the Earth and the Sun is wrong. Because if that was the case, we would be able to see the moon during the full eclipse of the Sun, as it would be bathed in bright earthshine. Right, we're going to go on to Rahu. Is one of the 9 major astronomical bodies called Navagraha in so-called Indian texts, which are not Indian at all, but Vedic and Rus texts. So, what are the Navagraha? Well, first we have Surya, Ravi, the sun; Chandra, Soma, the moon. No surprise, NASA's observatory is called Chandra, remember. Mangala, Mangal, which is Mars; Buddha, which is Mercury; Devguru, Brihaspati, Jupiter; Shukra, Venus; Shani, or Shani, oh dear, Shani, Saturn; Rahu, solar eclipse, it tells you in the book; Ketu, lunar eclipse. And curiously, in these texts there is no reference to the 3 outer planets, Uranus, Neptune or Pluto. Unlike the other 8, Rahu is a shadow entity, the one that causes the eclipses, and is also known as the King of Meteors. The rock throwers. You've heard me speak in those terms, the throwing rocks again. And one has to ask the question, if it was this planet that wiped out the dinosaurs, one also has to ask the question, were the occupants of this planet responsible for the flood also? Rahu represents the ascension of the moon in its precessional orbit around the Earth. Rahu is usually paired with Ketu. The time of day considered to be under the influence of Rahu is called Rahu Kala, K-A-L-A, and is considered inauspicious, but Kala is a derivative of Kali, which means dark, the dark mother. And as per Vedic astrology, Rahu and Ketu have an orbital cycle of 18 years and are always 180 degrees from each other orbitally, as well as in the birth charts. And this is Rahu and Ketu, the original yin and yang, sun, light, moon, dark, 180 degrees each, with the moon completing the circle, or the moon binding the circle. And this could be described as the dark version of the Holy Trinity. Now, to a little bit of extra to explain that. If you look at the yin and the yang, most people only see two portions, the light and the dark. What they miss is the binding circle that it creates. So you see it as light and dark inside of a circle, and it's binding. Now, this coincides with the precessional orbit of the moon, or the 18-year rotational cycle of the lunar ascending and descending nodes on the Earth's ecliptic plane. This also corresponds to a Saros, a period of approximately 223 synodic months, approximately 6,585 days, or 18 years, 11 days and 8 hours, that can be used to predict eclipses of the sun and the moon. So what is a Saros? Well, Saros is a period of time based on the lunar cycle, and it contains three periodicities related to the lunar orbit: the synodic month, the draconic month, and the animalistic month coincide almost perfectly each Saros cycle. Synodic means Council of the Church. So it's the priest class again, so prevalent in Egypt, and priest also means Cohen, spelt with a C or a K. Khan also means priest. Hence, Genghis Khan was from the priest class, who attacked the Rus and the Aryans. Anomalistic is suggestive of something being irregular, also known as an anomalistic year, which is 365 days, 6 hours, 13 minutes and 48 seconds. And the extra bits are why we have a leap year every 4 years, like the loop. Draconic months, oh my, I don't need to say any more on that term. Rahu rules the zodiac sign of Aquarius, together with Shani, which is Saturn. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Oh dear, that was prevalent in the New Age program, and it's not as good as many thought. Astronomically, Rahu and Ketu denote the points of intersection of the paths of the sun and the moon, as they move on the celestial sphere. Therefore, Rahu and Ketu are respectively called the north and south lunar nodes. The fact that eclipses occur when the sun and the moon are at one of these points gives rise to the old understanding of swallowing of the sun and the moon by the snake. That's how it's described in the ancient cultures. And Rahu is responsible for causing the eclipse of the sun, who in HU in Sumerian is serpent. As it stated, the swallowing of the sun and the moon by the snake. So this makes more sense. Ra is the serpent, is what that object called Rahu is stating. Now, one of the issues I have about astrology in the modern day is that it cannot be accurate because one constellation has been left out. We have 12, but one is missing. Same as 12 earth chakras and one hidden on the planet. 12 crystal skulls, but the 13th completes it. 12 plus 1. With the one hidden has been a major pondering of mine for the last decade. But if you add back in the 13th zodiac sign of Ophiuchus, then most of the whole current mode of understanding astrology needs to go in the shredder, in my opinion, as the charts and alignments would go askew with the 13th zodiac put back in. So what is it about Ophiuchus and why is it being left out? Perhaps there's a possible connection to Rahu, Melchizedek, Noah, Sham, Ham, Indian gods, and many others of the more noted names of the past in the books and scriptures. All were said to have the mark of the Nephilim, born with a coat of armour, which was scaly skin. Rahu is the serpent. With that in mind, let's look at Ophiuchus, shall we? Known as the Serpent Bearer, the constellation is said to consist of two planets, one covered in fiery molten lava and the other consisting of a large swamp, fire and water, is the yin and the yang. Ophiuchans had a natural affinity for snakes, and there was a special species of serpent called the Za Winder, Z-A Winder. House Ophiuchus had the greatest diversity in the zodiac. People's skin, hair and eye colour spanned the full range of the spectrum, yet upon entering their teens, Ophiuchans developed scaly skin that is said would protect them from various creature bites and the natural elements. The Ophiuchus sign is represented by a fight between man and serpent. What if we have been in the age of Ophiuchus and not Capricorn? Given the world's current and recent past has been the battle for control of this planet between man and the serpent or the reptile species. The zodiacal sign after Ophiuchus is Sagittarius, What if we are going into Sagittarius next and not Aquarius? One of my night travels around 4 years ago, I got into a discussion with an entity of where we were heading, we being the planet Earth. I disagreed with what I was being told and turned around and said, no, we're going to Sagittarius. It didn't make much sense back then, but with this piece, perhaps it does now. In front of Sagittarius is the G cloud, by the way. Rahu is mentioned explicitly in Buddhist mythology in a pair of scriptures from the Samyutta Nikaya of the Pali Canon, in the Kandima Sutta and the Surya Sutta. Now Rahu attacks Surya, the sun deity, and Chandra, the moon deity. No surprise, the moon deity Chandra is the name of NASA's X-ray observatory. Before being compelled to release them by their recitation of a brief stanza, it said. Now stanza means poem, conveying their reverence for the Buddha. And the Buddha responds by enjoining Rahu to release them, which Rahu does rather than have his head split into 7 pieces. Now the verses recited by the 2 celestial deities and the Buddha have since been incorporated into Buddhist liturgy as protective verses recited by monks as prayer of protection. But they're not protective. It is holding the dark, anchoring it. Everything gets reversed, like the mirror, you see. So Rahu attacks Surya. Rahu, the serpent, attacks Surya, who was the original Vedic solar deity known as the Protector, and was replaced in Indian and Hindu history with the fake solar deities Vishnu and Shiva. Both of them are dark forces and fake lords. The whole of India's religious culture, and in particular Hinduism, is riddled with the references to snakes. The Nagas in particular as associated with Vishnu, Bhairav and Ma Akala, and the worst of them all, Shiva. There is a reason Shiva is placed at the entrance of the collider known as CERN. It is an egregore guarding the gate to the underworld, along with a plethora of non-physical plane ninjas who we will cover later. So Rahu was in fear of being turned into the 7-headed serpent, and that entity is depicted throughout their temple called Angkor Wat. A wonder of the world indeed. The Nagas were cast into the underworld, and the entrance of which is marked by ant hills, it is said. How interesting, the ant people were guarding the entrance. And I suspect is what is being stated here. The ant people are different from the mantids, remember. People often get the two mixed up, but they are different. Atlantis. not Atlantis. According to the Hindu scriptures, Naga live in the netherworld called Naga Loka or Patala Loka with unimaginable richness, suggesting they were guarding or guardians of the treasures of what is now known as the Trust. So it went from the Naga serpents to the dragon serpents. Neither looked after it well, and this is why it is important going forward that we look after the treasures well. When the Naga were overpopulated on the earth, Brahma, the creator, said it banished them to the underworld. Naga are the children of Kashyap Rishi, who married Brahma 13 daughters. Their mother's name is Kudra. Kashyap is also the father of gods, demons and animals. So there's the connection again. The fake gods, the demons and the animals is reference to the totem animals in the Native American tribes. We all had an animal totem, but all of them fell, like the wolves. Snakes are Lord Shiva's garland, anklets and armlets. Hindu gods like Bhairav and Ma Akala are protected and decorated by snakes. The 1,000-headed Naga called Ananta protects goddess Kali. That is the Kali Ma, the Dark Mother, who is Lilith, represented as moon goddess, half woman, half serpent. Oops. And like Lord Vishnu, many gods rest on Naga or are protected by Naga. Naga guard the Hindu temples and the shrines. The Naga are depicted on the doors, windows and walls of all the temples, and Naga are also the seat of the deity. When we did a piece called What is Human, just prior to the first run of this, we gave the 3 names of Hu, H-U. In Sumeria, Hu means serpent. In Sanskrit, it means dragon, also pronounced Drakon, and also linked to Draco. But not the main Draco, but the Hydra Draco. There's Alpha Draconis and Hydra Draconis. The latter of which are more dragon-like species and in some cases are actually worse than the Draco. But if we have been in a Ophiuchus constellation as speculated earlier, perhaps this next bit will lean further towards that theory. In Ophiuchus tradition, the name for guardian is master, and master is a control-based term. In Sagittarius, the term for guardian is guardian. A guardian is the keeper, the protector. Big difference. This world, largely unknown, but to the very few on this planet, has for many thousands of years been a battle between human and serpent or reptile species. The zodiacal sign depict certain things like Aries the ram, Cancer the crab, Libra has the justice scales, or as it's better known now, given the clowns, just us scales, which is not justice actually. And that is also related back to Egyptian symbology of Mart and Thoth, weighing people's hearts. Not for justice, but more in the line of trade and genetics, if you ask me. Speaking of Egypt, as the pyramids are another symbol of their buildings, not ours, and Pharaoh means the great house, and what all the mythologies are stating via the zodiacal game playing is, the houses of the sky, known as the zodiacs, were conquered by the serpent bearer, and the houses of the sky then came down to earth. The 12 conquered houses or zodiacs were then brought down to earth, is what it's saying, and the great house of the Pharaoh was born, which then was transferred as a takeover of Europe via the houses, like the House of Bavaria, Orange, Saxe, Gotha, Coburg, etc. It's all in the symbology and mythology once you start to connect the dots. The narrative of the so-called Israel tribes also speaks of the 12 plus 1 and the hidden tribe of Israel. Matches the 12 zodiacs plus 1. Zodiacs are called houses, and the original for Israel was not the country of, but the house of Israel. That's what it says in the Bible and all the books. It doesn't say the country, it says the house of Israel. There was no country of Israel until the Rothschilds clan, along with the Draco and M and Lord Balfour and the other Zionists, created it. Because they thought they were going to take over that whole region and make it their own and rule from there. Anunnaki, known as those of royal blood, and also known by the term those who from heaven to the earth came, is an added clue, and in support of that analysis, the house of Ophiuchus came down to earth, known as the serpent bearers. The depiction for Ophiuchus is of a man fighting a snake, and I think this is a depiction of what has been playing out in the current zodiacal time space. It is the choice of Hugh Serpent Man or Hugh Man Us. The master reign ends and the guardians return. And that is why back in 2016, humanity, not raw humanity, won the right to be the sole guardians of this planet via the Peace Treaty. Right, let's go into the next section. And this next section will strip away more myths of the New Age movement that we covered in an earlier version of From Russia with Love 4 show. And that show was important to grasp of what went on from around 1880s through 1925 time period. Planned Parenthood, eugenics, Federal Reserve life force energy harvesting system, the destruction of Russia, and the New Age program done by the likes of Blavatsky, Steiner et al. Albert Pike, plans of 3 world wars, and the likes of Crowley and co. bringing forth the dark magician path. Because of their access to the looking glass technology, they knew religion would start to fail, particularly in the West, and so provided a new program to fall into. Remember, there was a hippie movement, as it was called, in the 1860s and 70s, as well as the 1960s and 70s. His story repeats. And think tanks take advantage of that to write new traps for the people. New Age is a deliberate sidetrack from one controlling system, religion, to another, fake spiritualism, all wrapped up in a nice package of Let's All Sing Kumbaya, which is about calling in the Lord. And the Lord of the book is Anu, the draconic reptile king. The whole of New Age is riddled with falsehoods, goddess this and angel that, and so-called light magic, which is dark in essence, as you are calling in the jinns to do the magic, and those entities are far from light. And in my opinion, all magic is dark. It is lazy technology being used again. When if you develop the self on a soul level, gain mastery over the self, you have a treasure of abilities, not magic, awaiting you. Tantra and yoga, which are the esoteric practices in Hinduism, philosophize about the serpent power inside the human body. This serpent is called Kundalini, depicted as a coiled snake. It would be evoked by mysterious yogic practice or tantric rituals. And when this serpent power is awakened, ignoramus humans are said to be liberated from worldly vices. But the literal meaning of Kundalini is coiled naga. Naga is the snake. If you look at the mythological pictures, you'll find Mahavir sitting with the five-headed cobra behind him, or Lord Vishnu is sitting in meditation and there is a cobra behind him. Another lord, from Anu to Vishnu, both had the scaly skin. But let's look at the description for Lord. Remember, the Ophiuchus term for guardian was master, and Lord is an appellation for a person or deity who has authority, control, or power over others, acting like a ruler, a chief, or a master. Oh my. Lord is a master, chief, or ruler. Does those descriptions resemble anything like what the Creator Source would act like? Think different. The Lord in the books is not God. It is fake idolatory worship of entities who self-appointed themselves as better than anyone else, like the pharaohs. Even in the pictures of rishis, R-I-S-H-I-S, you will find a cobra with its hood open at the back. In this description of the Hindu meditation practice, you will see the discrepancies. And their description of what happens when you are sitting in meditation. What is happening? Your consciousness is getting alert opened and awakened, as though in your background there is a 1,000-headed cobra. Cobra signifies alertness. How many of you feel a lot of alertness in the back of your head during meditation? A sort of wakefulness. So the cobra is a symbol of the energy that raises and opens up. Energy which is alert, and at the same time we also feel restfulness. It is not that there was really a cobra at the back of their head. It is a symbol of wakefulness in the deep state of rest. And that is meditation, totally restful, wanting nothing, doing nothing, being nothing, and being open, like the hood of a cobra, alert without any effort. And that's their depiction of meditation. Now, I don't know what type of meditation they're doing over there, but in my experience, when I was consciously doing meditation with the usual method of sitting down in quiet space or with some meditation music, now I can do it subconsciously whilst doing everyday things. Remember, it's a frequency zone you are accessing. If memory stores that frequency, you can drop into meditation mode whilst walking and also have your eyes open. And the one thing you don't get in meditation is alertness. Unless you are in defense mode at the same time. You are drifting into the ether, all light and airy. One thing that you are not is alert. And it's all in the symbolism. When Indian people with the flute call on a cobra to perform the cobra, the cobra uses its body like two legs, squatting, and lifts up its torso, and the head is on alert. That position is what they have taught man to replicate during the meditation. Sit in a squat position, head upright and slightly forward, replicating the cobra, stimulating and simulating the kundalini, which is the coiled snake. Are you getting the picture now? There are two types of descriptions for this. In one, they talk about a cobra. In another, they talk about a flower. It is like 1,000-petaled lotus, blossoming on the top of the head, on the crown chakra. So, back to Surya, the original solar deity. In Greece, he was known as Apollo, who regularly visited the Arya, also known as Hyperborea, who were replaced by the fake gods like Ra, Vishnu and Shiva. And what does Surya in the many statues depicted in India hold in both hands? The lotus flower, not the snake. So, summing up this part, Hinduism, along with Buddhism and the Tibetan monk practices, are all symbolizing the snake serpent cult. Vishnu, Shiva and other deities within that culture are the embodiment of the snake Naga. Naga, the underworld group, represented as hell in the scriptures. Well, that part is at least correct. False hidden hand worship with cloaked practices said to be and to help man, but actually it reinforces domain over man by giving your energy away to these serpent harvesters. That's what they're telling you. Hidden devious elements wrapped in a nice package of what is described as enlightenment via a created New Age program, all carefully choreographed into a descent, not enlightenment, but a cloaked descent into the dark. New Age is not what people think they're signing up to. It is another one of their carefully disguised traps. Their version of enlightenment is about as illuminating as the Illuminati. And I hope the people of India take note of this piece. It is not to denigrate you and your country, but to make you realize that your culture, passed down generation to generation, is damaging you and us badly. There is a reason 7,000 of you die each day in India. It's called sacrifice. And it's all going to the gods again, like in the Kali Ma time. The Rus tried to teach you with the Vedic texts. And like I said, they are not Indian texts, they are Rus, as is the Mahabharata. And the people of India need to wake up and stop the harvesting of your people, all done in honour of your fake gods. Now, Rahu is found in the Puranic genre of mythology. Puranic means ancient or old, which means it superseded Indian culture. And perhaps this next part will confirm that and where it came from. Puranic includes diverse topics such as cosmogony, cosmology, genealogy of gods, goddesses, kings, heroes, sages, and demigods. All the idolatory people, and the Saviour program, which is an addition to the original. Folk tales, pilgrimages, oh my God, pilgrims and pilgrimages. Who came to America and what were the Templars doing with the pilgrims there? Taking all the gold and silver off them and then killing them. Temples, medicine, astronomy, grammar, mineralogy, humour, love, and love stories, as well as theology and philosophy. Cosmogony is any model concerning the origin of either the cosmos or universe. Now, the Hindu Puranas are in anonymous texts and likely the work of many authors over the century, or so they state. It's a bit like the word dog. It is said to have no origin. But you didn't know that. The word dog has no origin. But in the world ran by cat and serpent cults, I guess the dog just doesn't fit in. The Puranas do not enjoy the authority of a scripture in Hinduism, but are considered a smriti, Smriti means that which is remembered. Smriti is a derivative secondary work and is considered less authoritative than Suruti in Hinduism. The Vedas, Mahabharata, are considered under this term, which means it came from someone or somewhere else. Funny how they can never remember the author or where words derive from in their history, isn't it? There are 18 Mahapuranas, great Puranas, and 18 Upa-Puranas, minor Puranas. Now, where have the terms great and minor been referenced recently? Because this is the key. The Great Bear and Ursa Minor. The Urs. And that is why they won't reveal who the authors of the Puranas. The Urs represent man. Hindu culture wants to represent the snake serpent man, just like the Catholic Church. And for those new and wondering why I say Catholic, check out From Russia with 3 for a full description of that. It's all connected through each part of this series. Now, the tale begins in the Puranas in the remotest periods of prehistoric time, when the gods and the Asuras churned the milk ocean to extract from it the Amrita, the elixir of immortality. And in the book it says Rahu was present at that time and overcome with pride. The milk ocean is described as the 5th of 7 oceans, and it surrounded the continent known as Koroncha. This continent and oceans is described as being around the Himalayas. The gods and the Asuras did the churning. Asuras are demons. The gods and the demons. Now, demons in real terms are the jinns. And this was a common goal of these fake gods, all seeking immortality, to continue their dominance over other species. And it is covered well about the reptile species in both Jupiter Ascending and the Dark Crystal series. Now, there are bodies of water dotted around the world, one not too far from where I reside, that still contain many beneficial healing properties that will prolong your lifespan and health. But I'm not so sure on immortality. I'm not so sure immortality is a good goal to be striving for anyway. Death, as they call it, is your reconnection to Source. It is not the end. It is a new beginning. And immortality means one lifetime. That's not a good goal, and that is only people who are wanting that are covering crimes they've committed, guilt and shame, and bad, dark practices. Because going back to Source, that will be reflected back, you see. To churn the ocean, they used to get this immortality potion, they used the serpent, Vasuki, for their churning string. For a churning pole, they used Mount Mandara placed on the back of a great tortoise. The Kurma avatar of Vishnu. The avatar of Vishnu. You see, clones and or walk-ins. They had this a long time ago, which means an entity taken over a vessel in here have been around a very long time. As the gods and demons churned the sea, a terrible poison issued out of its depths, which enveloped the universe. The Devas and Asuras approached Shiva, who took the poison into his throat and swallowed it. Shocked by this act, the goddess Parvati strangled his neck, and hence managed to stop it in his neck and prevent it from spreading. However, the poison was so potent that it changed the colour of his neck to blue, thereby earning him the name of Nilakanta, the blue-throated one. Better than blue chicken, I suppose. Blue avians. But all the depictions of the Indian gods all have blue faces. And this is the sign that all of them were poisoned and paid for their dark intentions. Now, maybe the key to that whole episode is you have to be of the right frequency to be able to consume that elixir. They clearly were not, and subsequently were poisoned. It's a bit like the sword. It's double-edged. It can protect you and it can cut you. One man's pleasure is another man's pain. When the Amrita finally emerged along with several other treasures, the Devas and Asuras fought over it. However, Vishnu, now in the form of Mohini, the enchantress, so now it's man to woman avatar, manages to lure the Asuras into handing over the Amrita to her, which she then distributes to the Devas. Now, a Deva is described as not as a female, but a male deity in Hindu, and it means heavenly or divine. The female version is Devi. And this is another example of the cross-gender meaning being played out by think tank social engineering bodies. Female personalities are known as divas, which is the male version. If you want evidence of these out of India deities spreading to Rome via Egypt, Vishnu, Brahma and Shiva are all known as the Holy Trinity. Oops. Siri, as in Sri Lanka, which is a breakaway country of India and follows the same deities. Siri means to cook, boil, to burn, diffuse light. And in light of the sacrifices to the Kali Ma, that kind of fits, does it not? But it is also used as a polite form of address, as in Mr. or Mrs. Hi, Mr. or Mrs. Jones. But hi, Mr. or hi, Miss. I want to cook, spoil or burn you somehow doesn't sound too polite to me. You know. And this is where we're lost in the hidden meanings of words. And it also means veneration of a deity known as Lakshmi, who was the consort of Vishnu, depicted as having 4 arms, which may be suggestive of an avatar and a walk-in. Shiva had multi-arms. Maybe it was multi-walk-ins or multi-altars. Not the fact that they had multiple arms. Svabhanu, an Asura, which is demon, disguises himself as a diva and tries to drink some Amrita himself. Surya, the sun god, and Chandra, the moon god, alert Vishnu to this deception. Vishnu then decapitates Svabhanu, nice god, just as he is about to swallow the nectar, leaving his head and beheaded body of immortal. Later the head part is known as Rahu, and the tail or torso is known as Ketu. A bas-relief at the temple of Angkor Wat in Cambodia includes a depiction of divas and asuras working together, both to stir up the ocean of milk in an attempt to free the precious objects lost within. And Angkor Wat, as nice as that building is, does not represent us, but them and their temples of sacrifice again. In fact, the carvings show human sacrifice on Angkor Wat. And in essence, Angkor Wat and that building represents the Naga serpent's triumph over man. Do you still think Indian culture is about enlightenment? And perhaps this next passage will make you rethink that notion. And this describes the ceremony for the nectar, stated to be the elixir of immortality, but appears to all intents and purposes to not. And according to the Tantras of Chakravarti and Tantras of Vajravāhi, a ceremony needs to be held for melting and blessing the inner offering nectar. And the 5 nectar needs to be arranged in 4 directions. And these are the 5 nectars in the 4 directions. Yellow excrement in the east. Green bone marrow in the north. White semen in the west. And red blood in the south. Blue urine is placed in the centre. Really enlightening ceremonies that. Shit, marrow, semen, blood and piss. Oh dear. And the 4 nectar should come from wise monks, and the ova should be collected from the first menstruation of a blessed woman. The 5 meats are arranged similarly. The meat of a black bull in the southeast, the meat of a blue dog in the southwest, the meat of a white elephant in the northwest, and the meat of a green horse in the northeast, and the meat of a red human corpse in the centre. please post my new GIF. I seriously want to vomit. After the ceremony, these ingredients will transform into an one-taste elixir called Ekaraza, which, according to them, bestows bliss, vitality, immortality and wisdom. Now, the nectar does not actually offer true immortality. Instead, by partaking it, the Devas were able to attain a higher level of knowledge and power, which they had lost due to the curse of the sage Durvasa. Durvasa is Rishi, mentioned earlier. Following this event, Rahu, head of the snake, and Ketu, tail of the snake, were given the responsibility to influence the lives of the humans on Earth. The north and south nodes of Earth, Rahu and Ketu, are the yin and yang symbol. Like I said earlier, there are 3 parts to yin and yang, not 2, as most people miss the circle around the yin and the yang. And what this circle is representing is the great question, and the answer is, it is the earth being ruled by Rahu and Ketu, the serpent beings. Yin and yang are not balanced, another illusion played on the masses by the dark-dominated East. Both are dark. One of them needed to be the light for balance. And this elixir may well be seeded or encoded for only the higher initiates in soul development. And it's a bit like how the treasure vaults were set up. Only 5 people on this planet can gain access to those vaults. Everyone else who engages dies on the spot. And could this elixir react in the same way? These people were not higher soul developed beings. They cheated by self-appointing themselves as important deities and gods. A real god would have been able to drink the elixir. Ketu in Sanskrit is the descending south lunar node in Vedic or Hindu astrology, and according to some accounts in Hindu mythology, Ketu belongs to Jaimini Gotra, whereas Rahu is from Paitinin Asa Gotra, and hence both are totally different entities with distinct characteristics, but are 2 parts of a common body. That's what it says in the text. 2 parts of a common body. Well, you can't have the mixture of light and dark in the one body. It's out of balance, particularly when that's enclosed. Now, Ketu is generally referred to as a shadow planet, and it is believed to have a tremendous impact on human lives and also the whole of creation. And in some special circumstances, it helps someone achieve the zenith of fame. Fame, like image and idol, all have the root word of mirror, the inversion. Ketu is often depicted with a gem or star on his head, signifying a mystery light. And as per Vedic astrology, Rahu and Ketu have an orbital cycle of 18 years, and they're always 180 degrees from each other orbitally. And as it said earlier, this also coincides with the precessional orbit of the Moon, or the 18-year rotational cycle of the lunar ascending and descending nodes of the Earth's ecliptic plane. Ketu rules the Scorpio zodiac sign together with Mangala, which means moon, and also Mars, house of war. Scorpio is the house before Ophiuchus. That is not a coincidence. Often Ketu is misunderstood as Uranus during Sanskrit to English translation. However, Uranus is only barely visible to the naked eye, and its discovery is attributed to the use of telescopes. Except the symbol of Ketu is the letter U, which would explain why it's linked with Uranus. In Hindu astrology, Ketu represents karmic collections, both good and bad, spirituality and supernatural influences, it is said, and Ketu signifies the spiritual process of the refinement of materialization to spirit, and is considered both malefic and benefic, as it causes sorrow and loss, and yet at the same time turns the individual to God. The problem is, which God? Because it's certainly not Source. In other words, it causes material loss in order to force a more spiritual outlook in the person. And Ketu is a karaka, or an indicator of intelligence, wisdom, non-attachment, fantasy, penetrating insight, derangement, and psychic abilities. Ketu is believed to bring prosperity to the devotee's family. There's the seducement program again. Follow me and I will give you riches. Just like all the bloodline families with the Dark Lord M and the Black Sun. Follow the dark and riches will be bestowed on you. If you don't, it won't. And this is what we're trying to do with the TPC. Share everything out. We don't have to dance with the dark. But those riches for the devotees come at a great cost. It is also said that it removes the effects of snakebite and illness arising out of poisons. He grants good health, wealth and cattle to his devotees. Ketu is the lord of the three nakshatras, or lunar mansions, lunar houses, Ashvini, Magha and Mula. Interesting term, Mula, which is a UK slang term for money, but it has another meaning in South America, as it is a term for smuggling drugs via the stomach. The hidden dangers within is symbolic, in my opinion. And Ketu is considered responsible for moksha, sannyasa, self-realization, jnana, described as a wavering nature, restlessness, and the endocrine system, oh dear, and slender physique. The endocrine system and the symbolic links to that going on this planet currently via adrenochrome harvesting. It all links back. As for Jnana, Jnana yogis cannot afford to believe or identify themselves with anything. People who walk the path of Jnana are people whose intellect is such that they are not willing to believe anything, nor do they disbelieve anything. So they're sleepers or bots then, essentially. And the people who come under the influence of Ketu can achieve great heights, most of them spiritual, it is said. But if it is anything like the spiritual methods of Hindu, Buddha and Tibet, I think I would give that a miss if I was you. Rahu, being a karmic planet, would show the necessity and urge to work on a specific area of life where there has been ignorance in the past life. To balance the apparent dissatisfaction, one has to go that extra mile to then provide a satisfactory settlement in the present lifetime. So this is what we've been talking about the dark. Both Rahu and Ketu, one symbolises stating to be the light, and one being the dark, but in essence they're both the dark. But the dark can teach the light. And if you observe that lesson, that dark becomes the light. Because it has no purpose anymore for the individual. The ruler of Ketu, according to the most popular astrology texts, Ketu is related to Matsya, exaltation and debilitation. And this has been a debatable point in astrology, as per BPHS. Ketu is exalted in the sign of Scorpio and debilitated in Taurus. However, many astrologers have disputed this, and most modern astrologers now seem to agree that Ketu is exalted in Sagittarius and debilitated in Gemini. So both Rahu and Ketu are in the sign of Scorpio, as referenced earlier. And this stands to logic, as Ketu is a torso, and a prominent part of Sagittarius is the big horse torso attached to a male upper body. Negative significations. While Ketu is considered malefic and has mostly been associated with negative things, most people consider it a difficult planet, as it brings a lot of troubles on the material plane. And it often brings a sense of detachment, losses, mindlessness, wandering and confusion in one's life. A bit like the bots again. And welcome to Earth, Ketu. And positive signs, there is a much deeper side to Ketu, and it has been called the most spiritual of all planets. And that's what I was mentioning earlier. If you observe, not absorb, it becomes a spiritual development lesson. And Ketu has been considered the planet of enlightenment and liberation, as the one who has lost his head in worldly senses, being a personification of renunciation, torso without a head who needs nothing. Ketu, the ascetic that wants to go beyond the mundane life and achieve the final liberation. Well, if you go through all the 7 planes without losing your head, without absorbing the dark, you will achieve your final liberation from the earth plane. You will not achieve that by dancing and cavorting with the dark. Dark is to be observed, not absorbed. By observing, you learn the lesson of how not to be or act. In one of my earlier shows, I mentioned the torus pattern over Earth, and it's shaped like an egg timer. At the centre in any system like that is called the void, the singularity. You are neither up or down the vortex. Now, the void to many has many dark connotations, a place of total darkness. But dark energy is only energy that hasn't been manifested into form or matter yet. It is the blank slate, a place of choice. It is a place of nothing for those with no imagination, but those with imagination can create from the blank slate. That's the difference between an artist and not. And we spoke about the east and west gates positioned in the centre of the 2 cones of the vortex as the place where all the choices and actions are made. East is for progression, west is for stagnated beings and a chance to do it all again, or we're all going to die. And with better results and outcomes for the next cycle. Now, having established with this show the north and south nodes are corrupted with the dark Rahu and Ketu, the east was the main battlefield for the past, with India and China playing key roles in blocking up or darkening the eastern gate. Please don't denigrate all Indian and Chinese people. It's just the pawn in the game. Having done so, they corrupted the West Gate and its peoples with their dark occult practices, passed off as love, light and empowering, when in reality this series has shown it was clearly not, and the dark magician tricksters pulled a massive stunt on the whole planet. One of the tricks I believe they used to trap us in the past is the sun rose in the west and set in the east. Another of their inversion programs. The double-coned vortex itself looks like an egg timer, which, funny enough, it says the sands of time pass through, or the hourglass. The hour is a heads up to Horus. That's where that word originated from. But if you are descending down the vortex through the singularity onto the lower vortex, the east would be on the left, the west on the right. But what if the cycle is completed and the egg timer is upside down on the next cycle? The east would now be on the right and the west on the left. Maybe this describes the pole shift, or more accurately explains the loop. And for those new, this planet has been in a Mobius loop trap, another of 78,000 years, 6 periods of 13,000 years. This cycle, that loop trap, ends permanently. The Mobius loop symbol, another one of their inversions, dotted around as sigils in New Age as peace and various other appearing beneficial aspects. And then in the 1970s they told you what it was, as it became the symbol of recycling. What they don't tell you is what was being recycled was us. This next transition phase will be more definable as more people and beings have peeled back the layers of deceit and are ready to go forward. Those that have the light go east, the same as the sun now rises in the east, goes dark in the west. Choose your light and create, or have none and set with the sun. Essentially, those of you who go west as the sun goes dark and subsequently sets, set being the operative word. Those are going with the entity known as Set, the left-hand path. The setting sun resets your timeline, or you define your own. For the connections of Set on the entity known as Jesus, it's on the cross, it's got IHS. Isis, Horus and Set is what that's depicting. This is not a physical transition as I understand it. It is a metaphysical transition, although it may become physical if things get too dangerous here, as a protective measure for this species. Have you noticed right through this show and in previous episodes the amount of words that start off with the letter K? The dark occultists changed the words and spellings to represent the letter K. Magic, spelt with a C, is switched to a K. Mystic, the same. Witches connected to the moon goddess aspect are very prevalent in this practice. It is both indicative and a symbol of the worship of the Dark Mother and the serpent race. Just look at some of the names just in this show. Cohen became Khan. Kali Ma, the Dark Mother, another moon goddess. Julius Caesar, represented at a later time period by the term Kaiser, the lord of the Kaaba, not Kabbalah, just Kab-Ar, the moon god. Kudra, Kashyap, is also father of gods, demons and animals. And like I said, it's interesting, he is the father of the animals, and this is to do with the animal totems of the tribal people. Kumbaya and Kundalini. Cobra, spelt with a C, but there is also a version with a K that is also indicative. The Cobra with a K is a cult, the cult of Cobra. Or sometimes it's just Cobra, and it is a secret criminal religious sect that began in India. Its origins are kind of shrouded in the mist of time. Well, not no more it's not. And whether it's a coincidence or not, the alt media personality Cobra seems to be connected with an awful lot of moon goddesses, does he not? In modern day Jewish tradition, they speak of a sacrifice ceremony with letter K, no surprise. This sacrifice made by Noah was a Korban Olah, which means a sacrifice that goes up, a tribute to God that was entirely burnt on the altar. The mystery of the Himalayan region with an ocean, Kraoncha, now known of course with another K word, Kashmir. We are both travellers of time and space, indeed. So there was an ocean where the Himalayas was in the past. Kurma, the avatar of Vishnu. Ketu, known as the tail of the snake. What was once part of India and now a separate country, Kandy Ceylon, Kandy spelt with a K, now known as Sri Lanka. The word communism and capitalism, now spelt with a C to hide it, but is still used in Germanic countries. But it was originally spelt with a K. Then we go into the rogue elements in China, who operate on behalf of the black dragons called the Kuomintang. All dragon groups are operated by the serpent reptiles at the top end. All of them. Another group who emerged out of communism, which was created by the Zionists under the banner of Social Democrats, which is in Germany and also in Sri Lanka, found its way over to America in 1865, called the KKK, Ku Klux Klan. And Antifa shares the same logos as the German Nazi Party political name. The Zionists have a book and run dark agenda programs that is a mirror version of the real tree of life called the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is the tree of death, or Darth, as it says on their tree. And you also have in Jewish and some Amish cultures, they are one and the same group, is why called kosher. Is it a coincidence when the sub-grey race were thrown out of the Garden of Eden and banished to Egypt, that 2 countries on that path now have K names, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. India alone has 31 towns or cities beginning with the letter K. The capital city of India is Calcutta, spelt with a C. Not no more, it's not. It's now Kolkata with a K. And then we go back to From Russia with Love 1 and the Star Wars fight between the light and dark forces involving the Urs and others against the dark forces known as the Koshis. Koshi became kosher, in my opinion. And given the greater details you now have on Noah, perhaps you will now grasp more of a recent piece I did around the first run of this, which I'll now repeat again with added pieces to it. And this was a speech by a Jewish rabbi, which was made September or so last year. On September the 25th, the 5,780th anniversary, on the day which Jewish tradition holds the world was created. Might have been theirs, it's not ours. The Sanhedrin is holding a conference for the emerging organisation of 70 nations. The conference will culminate in an animal sacrifice made by representatives of the nations on the Mount of Olives, in which they will renew the covenant, which is a binding, made by Noah upon leaving the ark. The ark was not a ship on the water, but a ship in the sky. He and his merry band of chimeras. And it said the conference will begin on Wednesday evening, September 25th, the 25th day of the Hebrew month of Elul, at the Jerusalem Gate Hotel, and continue until Friday, September the 27th, and lectures and discussions will focus on the Noahide obligations incumbent upon all of mankind. Also discussed will be the universal economic, cultural and educational topics that should be the focus of such an organisation. And a major focus will also be the establishment of an international court based on Bible principles. Based on whose Bible? And it is said God established the borders of the world based on the 70 children of Israel. Really? So God drew lines on a map to divide people, did he? That's what he's saying there. Who went down to Egypt and the 70 nations that came out from Noah. And the concept of 70 nations also appears in reference to the 70 oxen offered in the temple throughout Sukkot, which is the Feast of the Tabernacles, which the Talmud, Sukkah 55b, teaches are for the merit of the 70 nations. But what are these 70 nations? When we were told God only chose one in all the books. Is God planning globalist expansion programs? That's what they're telling you there. One world. Government, currency and religion. And then he said on the first day of the conference we'll end with a joint prayer by all the participants. Rabbi Yeshayahu Hollander, the Sanhedrin's foreign minister, has been tasked with composing the unique prayer for the special occasion. Rabbi Hollander said, religion is a difficult word. An individual does not need a religion to relate to God. Good start. And take note of that statement, because I'm certain our recent theme of contradictions, hello Drake, will unfold shortly. He said Adam did not need religion to speak to God, because Adam was created by the gods, is why. Adamu, which is where the Adam originates from, means slave, and was a genetic creation of the serpent people. He said religion is an activity that a community does together, and that's fine, unless someone has a different religion, and then let's fight over whose God is better. Fantastic community building that is. Not. Nations were established with Noah, he said. I thought he said it was established by God earlier. Does that mean Noah is God now? And then he said there became a need for religion. There we go. We need to come together as distinct nations and religions. A nation that has the attributes that define it, but it also needs a religion. And there you have it all in one paragraph. You don't need religion, and now you do. It's like the first hour in a Cosmic Voice show. Well, ain't that right, Clem? Rabbi Hollander said, suggesting that the United Nations lacked this attribute. So you're calling out the UN. An organisation of nations necessarily needs to be religious. 70 nations under God, but not any specific common religion, he said. So is he suggesting a reduction of nations under the banner of the UN? Now the UN is being exposed and is collapsing, and in comes an even darker replacement, of which all countries must be approved by Israel. It's a bit like the Federal Reserve. The Rothschilds were replaced by the Black Sun. And no, the Black Sun is not the lesser of the two evils. The ceremony will renew the covenant made between mankind and God at that time. But which God are they referring to? We never made any covenant. The dark forces did that, and like Solomon, bound us into it. That is what took place. Covenant, which like the word testament, means to bind. Why would God bind us? Bind us like the sacrificial offerings before being put in the fire. Is that what he's saying? Or is it covenant or ant-coven? Quote, I now establish my covenant with you and your offspring to come, and with every living thing that is with you, birds, cattle, and every wild beast as well. But when you consider in the Talmud, non-Jewish people are declared beasts. And in the Black Law Dictionary, humans means monster. And education means training of animals. It went on. All that have come out of the ark, every living thing on earth, I will maintain my covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of a flood. I guess they just saved that for the sacrifices, as all flesh is cut off, animal or human. And the line, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. But given it was the so-called gods who delivered the flood, as they knew about it beforehand, and possibly the rock throwers, Rahu, meteorites, king of the meteorites, was the one that delivered it. Essentially what they're saying is, as long as you stay bound to their undeterminable God and his covenant, we won't drown you again. That's what they're saying. Now, part of that statement I've just read out was made from Genesis 9 through 11. You think the 9-11 part is a coincidence? It's not. Because 9/11 is another one of their pagan ritual sacrifice dates. And this sacrifice made by Noah was a Korban Olah, a sacrifice that goes up, a tribute to God that was entirely burnt on the altar. And it said in this passage, just as Noah was not Jewish, but a servant of God, this ceremony is a declaration that mankind is serving Hashem, God, literally the name, and Hashem is the new name along with Jehovah, Yahweh, Tetragrammaton, Noah, Adoniah, all too common of name changes amongst the people who follow this cult. Like Malachowski becomes Netanyahu, Lenin was Ulyanov, Bauer became Bauer, both of which are Rothschild, which is a title, not a name. Same as Moses, a title, not a name. And Rabbi Weiss explained that the altar must be built and the sacrifice made by someone from the nations who keeps the 7 Noahide laws. It is still unclear, he said, this is a religious act, but not for any specific religion. But why do we need an altar, which means sacrifice? Surely we have developed sufficiently to see through that illusion that we must kill animals or people as sacrifice to the gods. And yet just last year this rabbi is championing it again. And then he went on with this gem of contradictions and said this is a meta-religion, not a global religion, which is inherent in every person and expressed in his own way. The world needs to return to religion. Rejecting religion, rejecting God, is a sickness that is afflicting the world, he said. So having said we don't need a religion, now he says we do, using the term meta which means about, after, beyond, and amongst. Like metadata, which means data about data. So meta-religion means religion about religion. Does that make any sense? But it's not a global religion. He said it was a global religion. How can it be a global religion when it was stated for only 70 nations, when there are 209 nations? What happens to the other 139 nations not deemed adequate enough for this new meta-religion? Is the great question that needs to be asked. And these ceremonies are stated as sacrifices to atone their sins, their own sins, says Rabbi Weiss. But why is a poor animal, or child in some cases, as covered in the earlier From Russia with Love parts, responsible for the Hebrew Jewish cult crimes or sins? Does anyone sit down and think and ask, why are others made to end their lives because of the misdemeanors of ourselves? And the same applies to the whole Jesus narrative. He died for our sins, they say. Why did Jesus get sacrificed when he didn't commit the crimes or sins? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But I wonder what would happen if THI created a religion and all members declared their sins and offered up the Rothschilds family as the sacrifice. Whether people would think that that was acceptable. Well, most would say that it's not. And yet this whole religion is based on that very concept and is lost to most people, including the Jewish people, who they're using as pawns. And what this is it's called scapegoating. And you do realise where the term scapegoat came into existence, because it is a Jewish sacrifice term. That's where scapegoat came from. It's a Jewish Hebrew sacrifice term. Sacrificing somebody else for their crimes. And like I said, the ceremony is called Korban Olah. Korban means to draw close. Olah means Holocaust. Why would a Jewish rabbi do a ceremony with the word Holocaust in it? Because Holocaust means religious sacrifice by fire. So Korban Olah means to draw close the Holocaust. The term Holocaust did not come into being after World War II, or during it even. It's back to the Herod and Solomon sacrifice temples again. In fact, Holocaust did not come in till 12 years after the war and related to the Jewish people dying. The nascent Sanhedrin released a declaration to the 70 nations for Hanukkah to be read at a ceremony in Jerusalem on the last day of the holiday. And the ceremony will include the consecration of a stone altar prepared for use in the third temple. and the declaration is intended as an invitation to the nations to participate in the temple and to receive its blessings. Oh dear. Sacrificing animals and children now is declared as a blessing for source sakes. Every temple around the world is a sacrifice centre for these dark magician psychopaths, whether these people are aware of it or not. They need to learn, and they need to learn fast. That third temple is for the fake gods. Hope you realise that. That's the real caliphate, where Israel goes from Egypt all the way to India, like the path of From Russia with Love 1. Right, final part of tonight's show. Here is what occurred when the previous temple was built. Because what they're declaring is they're going to create this third temple, which is actually the fourth. And when the previous one was built under the much revered King Solomon, Solomon was a source warrior sent here to do work on behalf of Source. But he sold humanity out. And it's a common theme of source warriors. No, I'll bite my tongue. During the building of the second temple, he decided to use what we now call the demons to build it. And the real name for them is jinns. He was given a ring that worked magic with a C or K, but he didn't believe it, and he used a child to cast the spell that summoned forth each demon spirit one by one. Nice chap he was, using a child as a guinea pig to test if it worked. And for further details of that event and the roles and the specific types of interference each demon exhibited and carried out, read the full text of the Testament of Solomon. There is a 30-page version rather than 300. That is probably easier to absorb. And there's that word again, testament, and it has the same meaning of covenant, which means to bind. Old or New Testament is new boss, same as the old boss, and we were all bound by demons due to this cult. And as each one was summoned forward, the ring was thrown at the chest of each demon, and that bound them to earth. And Solomon put them to work on building the temple. And this was a catastrophic mistake, and why I warn of the dangers of magic, light or dark, they both come with a price or consequences that are not conducive to the individual using them. And a repeat warning, a warning for those that use magic, a message: you are not performing the magic yourself. That is the illusion. You are calling in the non-physical dark spirits to do the magic for you. And once they're here, they wreak havoc on you and everybody else. The covens and witches holding hands in a circle creates the portal to bring the jinns in from the underworld. Jinns reside with the Nagas, the serpent people, and if you are involved in witchcraft, please quit it or any group associated with it, like Wiccan. Like the India spiritual group, you've been duped. So let's have a look at Wiccan and compare it to earlier mentions. It's pagan based. It has goddesses, rituals on a full moon, worship the horn god, which is the Baphomet, another chimera, half man, half goat. And here is a list of the gods and goddesses a Wiccan worships: the Germanic Eostra, which is Ostara, and the real reason for the celebration known as Easter, which the Catholic Church changed the name in the 8th century and wrapped it into the Jesus story. The next one, the Hindu goddess Kali, celebrated by the Wiccans. Oh dear, it's the Dark Mother again, the Kali Ma, and the Catholic Virgin Mary is one and the same. It's another fake story, the Immaculate Conception. Dearie me. And we're supposed to believe that? Because that is a conspiracy, if ever there was one. As each as manifestations of one supreme goddess, and likewise the Celtic Cernunnos, another chimera, half man, half elk. The ancient Greek Dionysus, the goddess of wine, and wine is a spirit, and so induces to jinns. And the clincher and the dot connector of the Wiccan is the Judeo-Christian. There is no two parts to it, it's all the same thing. Christian came out of Judea and the Talmud. But they worship Yahweh as aspects of a single archetypal God. And if that wasn't enough about Wiccans to show their path of darkness, they also partake in one of the 5 hooks, sex, by performing sex rituals. Other traditions wear robes with cords tied around the waist, just like the red or black robed priests in the Vatican. Or even normal street clothes. The robes symbolizes the priest, and it's why a judge wears the robe. It is a high priest or a high priestess. It's the same program. In certain traditions, ritualized sex magic is performed in the form of the Great Rite, whereby a high priest or high priestess invoke the god and goddesses to possess them. Possess them. That's the walk-ins we mentioned. And they are no longer in control of the vessel. And I think most people on this planet are walk-ins, which is why we have the synth or bot-like behaviour. Before performing sexual intercourse to raise magical energy for use in spell work, it is called, spell work. And the group known as Mystic with a K, Mountain, is not without similarities here, it seems. Mystic Mountain. Dark-based witchcraft, as a patchwork quilt running through the echo chamber, is multifaceted and broad, yet simplistic once the main basic pattern is identified. In nearly all cases, it is instead performed in token during the ritual, thereby merely symbolic. Yeah, right, we know different. The symbolized version, they state, is by using the athame, A-T-H-A-M-E, which is a knife to symbolize the penis, and the chalice to symbolize the womb. Just like Washington, D.C., with the monument symbolizing the Osiris penis, and it's next to the Oval Office, which is the womb. It's not a coincidence. It's the quote-unquote Egyptian again. Rite, R-I-T-E, as in Scottish Rite, who were instrumental in the layout of Washington. A rite has three main meanings. Rites of passage, generally changing an individual's social status. Communal rites, whether of worship, where a community comes together to worship, such as a Jewish synagogue or mass, both of which are indicative in my opinion. And the final clincher, the rites of personal devotion, whereby an individual worships, including prayer and pilgrimages, such as the Muslim Hajj, which is the Mecca ceremony, which is a looshing factory on a massive scale, which we will cover, I think, in 8b or 8c, more on that. Many of you have heard of the Ring of Solomon, that still exists and is worn by the Rothschilds at this time. No surprise there, is there? Quite frankly, it is time that family is dealt with once and for all. But I'm pleased we engaged with some of the Rothschilds family recently, as referenced in the last show. I will be engaging them fairly soon again. They all got duped, you see, including the three lead Rothschilds. But whilst Rothschilds and their extended family network achieved wealth, assets and power, all courtesy of the Habsburg family, it all came at a very heavy price for them and their family members. A darkened soul incapable of love or compassion. And essentially, Rothschilds are Rumpelstiltskin. And for those who have watched the series Once Upon a Time will understand that better. In fact, if you want to find out the real meaning of magic and what it means, go and watch that show. Now we all need the dark, as they provide the lessons to those not following that path. But the heavy swing of darkness here and other places throughout this universe tilted way beyond balance. And it was stated that this universe was created by a source being who only wanted light. And if that is correct, that experiment has failed badly. The dark came in with what is known as the fractal virus and began to corrupt everything. Other entities then took advantage, both humanoid and non-human looking, and the whole universe tilted badly to the dark in the region of 83 to 87%. And this is why I speak of the 45-55 balance. A 5% correction either way can easily be fixed. 33 to 37% in this case has taken many thousands, if not millions of years to correct. Those of the light need the dark to provide an opposite to enable you to recognize which path you are on. It's the dance of life, as we contain both the ability to be an angel, quote unquote, and a demon, quote unquote. And it's about which path you choose, and is only yours to make. But with this type of imbalance, it was more a case of the path open to you that looked all lovely and light, but was actually a seducement into the darkness. And for further details of the Solomon stuff, check out my show Demons and Magic. It's on the must listen to list. And in the next instalment of this 8B, we will reveal the real hidden hand of all the names and organisations that have been brought up in this series, and it will be even more packed than this show, connect more dots than previous shows, and open up the Pandora box once and for all. We opened up that box, and look what's unfolded since. And as this series has shown, it's all in the words. When people take the time to look into it, etymology study will bring many of you great benefits. It connects more dots and has a deeper understanding. And really, etymology should be in every classroom around the world and taught. The written word has been abused badly over the last 600 or so years of our history, distorted into a subset of reality called illusion, perpetuated at that time by the Roman Church that marched through towns destroying their history, oral teachings and written, destroyed or looted ancient treasures and artefacts the world over, declared science as a pseudo-subject until they rewrote it into a program that fits their narrative. Mistranslations, vowels changed, names changed, religious denominations hidden, countries ransacked, cultures and ancient practices destroyed. America, a prime example. Columbus himself was funded by the Roman Church. They don't tell you that in school because it doesn't fit their narrative. They use meme sentences to push home their narrative, like Columbus founded America. And yet how many ask the question, are they stating America never existed prior to Columbus? Seriously. That is as bad as the whole world started around 6,000 years ago out of the biblical books. But the Bible can't be wrong, it is said. Yes, tell that to the talking snake. I'm sure you will have a very interesting conversation. I'm not here to trash all portions of religion, be it Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism or New Age. All of them have messages within them that are a part of what we are trying to achieve going forward. Messages of peace, harmony, love your fellow man, love nature and the planet, compassion, empathy, thou shalt not steal, murder or harm, all very valid exercises and lifestyles to live by. But here's the kicker. All those just mentioned are our own basic elements of what it means to be a human. And since when did we need books, churches, the priest class, pharaohs, fake gods or angels to tell us or guilt us into doing that with a program? We didn't, and that's the hook. The program that they have employed to harvest our energy and take us away from what it is to be human. Take away our inherent right and connection to source. Take us away from us as beings of light and used as batteries to enhance the dark forces. The religious program of all denominations, and I mean all of them, stem from just one server. The rest are just terminals. Terminal being the operative word, and reference points for divisive programs, something that resembles good, just like the poison chalice, but has far darker intentions. Why are we still following ancient gods and not creating our own gods? And people will say you can't do that, they are divine beings. Wrong. That was the illusion. Every soul has the potential to be divine. In fact, a species cannot thrive without developing its own kind. We're not developing. We are in devolution due to these hierarchical freaks. The real definition of a god is any being who evolves onto a higher soul development level that is open to all living beings, not these select few who clearly never developed anywhere near higher soul level. Otherwise they wouldn't be asking you to sacrifice people or animals or worship them, because a true god or higher soul developed being does not ask to be worshipped or honoured. They elevate those who haven't reached that status yet. Big difference. People ask why these dark or bad people don't appear to have karma in this lifetime at least. Well, all those religions mentioned earlier have what is called a Day of Atonement. Remember what the rabbi said earlier? These ceremonies are stated as sacrifices to atone their own sins. So in other words, they are passing their karma onto the rest of the people who don't follow their gods. And that's exactly what happens. They know the secrets, we don't. And they pass their sins and karma onto we the people. Now do you understand the power of words, ceremonies, and the appeal of sacrifices these people do? It's word magic, spells, and incantations again, perpetuated by dark occults and witches, all of which dance with the demons, better known as jinn. But the jinn who are there to push the dark agenda, as it is their role in creation to do so. It is the trap and also the balance in nature. But all of these religious programs have tipped the balance of nature onto this planet and sent many spiraling into the left-hand path of the dark. And all have a responsibility to correct that. And that's what these shows are all about. Having knowledge is one thing, acting upon it is another. And the question that remains is, with over 2/3 of the planet wrapped into a religion or other, a figure which was higher in the last 600 years, why has this planet, with all its good religious intentions, as they say, has this planet always been in a mess, turmoil, divisive, nasty and warlike? Question 2. Why is a high percentage of those deemed atheists have a lower violence or divisive streak? Question 3. Why are children brought up in a non-religious way more altruistic? What does the answers to those questions tell you? I'm not asking you to think logic. An example of logic, which is a science that deals with the formal principles of reason. If a visitor walks in the house with wet hair, it is logical for one to assume that it's raining outside. That was an assumption. Assumption is not fact or truth, and like most of our knowledge, language, logic or reasoning, it's heavily flawed, because their system of lies relies on us believing the assumption, not the fact or the truth. So I'm asking you all to think realistic. What is real and what is the illusion? Like the mirror, which is a likeness of an image, not the image. The real image is viewed in the third person. The lies and the illusions will be no more. The curtain of darkness and deception will be pulled back, and the light will shine through on an unprecedented level, as we have seen. Nowhere to run and nowhere to hide after this episode. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now.